The political landscape in the United States has been a battleground of ideas, emotions, and narratives, with figures like Al Gore and Bill Maher occupying unique positions in the public discourse. Recently, a notable exchange between these two on Maher's show encapsulated the tensions that have defined much of the Democratic Party's approach to Donald Trump and his supporters. This moment, steeped in the broader context of electoral defeats, evolving media dynamics, and the dangers of inflammatory rhetoric, serves as a microcosm of the challenges facing American political dialogue today. By dissecting this encounter and its implications, we can better understand the pitfalls of fear-based political strategies, the importance of historical precision, and the need for a more grounded approach to winning over voters. The exchange began with Al Gore, the former vice president and a prominent figure in Democratic circles, appearing on Bill Maher's show to discuss the state of American politics. Gore, known for his environmental advocacy and his role in the Clinton administration, arrived armed with a familiar set of talking points. These included warnings about Donald Trump's authoritarian tendencies, the dangers of populism, and the need to protect the Constitution from what he described as a clear and present threat. His rhetoric was passionate, drawing on historical analogies to caution against the rise of strongman dictators who manipulate public opinion and consolidate power. While Gore explicitly avoided direct comparisons to Adolf Hitler, he referenced warning signs from history, including the Third Reich, to underscore his concerns about Trump's leadership style. Gore's arguments were rooted in a broader narrative that has dominated Democratic messaging for nearly a decade: the portrayal of Trump as an existential danger to democracy. He pointed to Trump's rhetoric on immigration, his attacks on institutions like the judiciary and Congress, and his dismissal of scientific consensus on issues like climate change. Gore argued that these actions mirror the tactics of authoritarian leaders who scapegoat minorities, suppress dissent, and push alternative facts to maintain power. For example, he cited Trump's claims about windmills causing cancer and coal being clean as evidence of a deliberate effort to distort reality. He also referenced the war in Ukraine, rejecting the notion that Ukraine was responsible for Russia's invasion and framing such assertions as part of a broader pattern of misinformation. This narrative, while resonant with many on the left, has been a double-edged sword. It galvanizes the Democratic base, but risks alienating a significant portion of the electorate, particularly those who voted for Trump. As Gore spoke, it became clear that he was operating within a framework that assumes moral and intellectual superiority over Trump supporters. This approach, however, has proven politically costly, as evidenced by the Democratic Party's struggles in recent elections. The 2024 presidential election, in particular, delivered a stark reminder of this disconnect, with Trump securing a decisive victory despite years of warnings about his authoritarianism. The electorate, it seems, was less concerned with abstract threats to democracy than with tangible issues like inflation, border security, and distrust in elite institutions. Bill Maher, the host and a longtime commentator known for his irreverence, was not content to let Gore's monologue go unchallenged. Over the years, Maher's platform has evolved from a reliably liberal space to one that critiques both sides of the political spectrum. This shift has made him a polarizing figure among progressives, who view his willingness to challenge leftist orthodoxy as a betrayal, and conservatives, who appreciate his candor but remain skeptical of his liberal roots. In this particular episode, Maher's frustration with Gore's rhetoric was palpable. He pushed back forcefully, arguing that the Democratic obsession with demonizing Trump and his supporters was not only ineffective but actively counterproductive. Maher's critique centered on the overuse of inflammatory historical analogies, particularly those invoking Nazism. While Gore had been careful to avoid directly comparing Trump to Hitler, his references to the Third Reich and authoritarianism were close enough to trigger Maher's ire. Maher argued that such comparisons are not only inaccurate, but also deeply alienating to the millions of Americans who voted for Trump. "I guarantee that the side of the country that voted for Trump, they hear Nazi and they just go, 'Oh, you're calling us Nazis,'" Maher said. He emphasized that this rhetoric creates a false premise, painting Trump supporters as inherently evil rather than as people with legitimate grievances. This, Maher argued, fuels a cycle of mutual hatred that is more powerful than any political or economic incentive. The exchange highlighted a fundamental flaw in the Democratic strategy, the reliance on fear and moral outrage to mobilize voters. For years, Democrats have framed Trump as a uniquely dangerous figure, warning of fascism, dictatorship, and the end of democracy. This approach reached its peak during the 2016 and 2020 elections, when terms like deplorables and fascists were hurled at Trump supporters with abandon. Yet, as Maher pointed out, this strategy has consistently backfired. The 2016 election saw Trump defeat Hillary Clinton despite her campaign's warnings about his unfitness for office. The 2020 election, while a victory for Joe Biden, was far closer than Democrats had anticipated. And in 2024, Trump's landslide victory underscored the limits of fear-based messaging. Maher's critique was not just about rhetoric, it was about strategy. He argued that Democrats need to move beyond vilifying Trump and focus on winning over voters with substantive ideas. "You don't win hearts and minds by calling your opponents evil," he said. "You just widen the divide." This point was particularly poignant given the context of the 2024 election, which saw Democrats lose key swing states and fail to connect with working-class voters. Maher's plea was for a return to pragmatism, a recognition that voters are more concerned with their economic well-being and personal freedoms than with abstract warnings about authoritarianism. Gore, to his credit, attempted to clarify his position. He acknowledged the dangers of comparing anyone to Hitler, calling it a big mistake, and emphasizing that Hitler's evil was unique and unparalleled. However, he doubled down on his broader point, arguing that the Constitution requires vigilance against leaders who exhibit authoritarian tendencies. He cited historical examples of strongman dictators who began their rise by controlling narratives, undermining institutions, and consolidating power. While these points were not without merit, they fell flat in the face of Maher's broader critique that such warnings, however valid, are politically ineffective when they alienate the very voters Democrats need to win. The exchange also touched on a related issue, the misuse of historical analogies in political discourse. Maher was particularly incensed by the casual invocation of Hitler and Nazism, not just by Gore, but by other prominent figures. He referenced an incident involving Larry David, his longtime friend and a comedic icon, who had compared Trump to Hitler in a moment of rhetorical excess. Maher didn't spare David, calling the comparison lazy and unhinged. He argued that equating Trump with Hitler trivializes the Holocaust and cheapens the moral weight of history. "Hitler has got to stay in his own place," Maher said. "He is the goat of evil, and we're just going to have to leave it like that." This point resonated deeply, as it addressed a broader trend in political rhetoric. The overuse of terms like Nazi and fascist has diluted their meaning, turning them into catch-all insults rather than precise descriptors of historical atrocities. This not only undermines the gravity of events like the Holocaust, but also desensitizes the public to genuine threats. When every political opponent is labeled a Nazi, the term loses its power to shock or inform. Maher's insistence on historical precision was a call for intellectual honesty, a reminder that hyperbole is not a substitute for reasoned critique. Maher also addressed a specific piece of misinformation that has circulated in Democratic circles, the claim that J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, called Trump America's Hitler. Maher debunked this, noting that Vance's actual statement was far more nuanced, suggesting that Trump could be either a flawed figure like Richard Nixon or a more dangerous leader. The misrepresentation of Vance's words, Maher argued, was emblematic of a broader pattern of distortion and exaggeration. Democrats and their media allies have often taken quotes out of context to paint Trump and his supporters as uniquely evil, a tactic that Maher described as dishonest and lazy. This not only undermines trust in political discourse, but also alienates voters who see through the spin. The broader implications of this exchange are profound. The Democratic Party's reliance on fear and outrage has not only failed to defeat Trump, but has also deepened the nation's political divide. By framing Trump supporters as irredeemable, Democrats have alienated millions of Americans who might otherwise be open to their message. This was evident in the 2024 election, where voters in key swing states rejected Democratic candidates in favor of Trump's populist platform. The lesson, as Maher articulated, is clear. Lecturing voters doesn't work. Tantrums don't win elections. If Democrats want to regain their footing, they must focus on addressing voters' concerns: economic insecurity, immigration, cultural disconnection, rather than preaching about democracy's demise. Gore's appearance on Maher's show also highlighted the evolution of Maher's platform. Once a bastion of liberal talking points, Real Time with Bill Maher has become a space for challenging orthodoxies on both sides. This shift has made Maher a lightning rod for criticism, particularly from progressives who view his critiques of the left as disloyalty. Yet Maher's willingness to confront figures like Gore and David underscores his commitment to intellectual honesty. He is not afraid to call out his own side when he believes they are wrong, a rarity in today's polarized media landscape. This approach has earned him a diverse audience, including conservatives who appreciate his candor and liberals who value his willingness to question dogma. The exchange also raised questions about the role of legacy politicians like Gore in shaping the Democratic Party's future. Gore, a figure from the Clinton era, represents a brand of liberalism that feels increasingly out of touch in the age of populism. His reliance on climate change panic, anti-Trump cliches, and historical analogies reflects a worldview that resonates with coastal elites but struggles to connect with the broader electorate. Maher's pushback was a reminder that the Democratic Party cannot rely on figures from the past to address the challenges of the present. If the party is to rebuild, it must cultivate new voices, leaders who can speak to the concerns of working class, voters without resorting to fear or condescension. Ultimately, the Gore-Maher exchange was a microcosm of the broader challenges facing American politics. The overuse of inflammatory rhetoric, the reliance on fear-based messaging, and the failure to engage with opposing viewpoints have deepened the nation's divide and undermined the Democratic Party's electoral prospects. Maher's critique was a call to action, not just for Democrats, but for all Americans who value reasoned discourse and political unity. By focusing on facts, listening to voters, and avoiding the temptation to demonize opponents, the nation can begin to bridge the gap between red and blue. As the dust settles on the 2024 election, the lessons of this exchange remain relevant. The Democratic Party faces a choice: continue down the path of outrage and division, or embrace a new approach that prioritizes pragmatism and inclusion. Maher's message was clear: the old playbook is broken. It's time for something new. Whether Democrats will heed this advice remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the stakes could not be higher. In a nation fractured by distrust and animosity, the path forward lies not in fear, but in understanding, not in hysteria, but in hope.